He's not qualified to be the president of the United States. Is this who we want as a president? Is this who we want our kids to see? I don't think so.
So I will be voting for Trump.
Well, there you have it. Former Republican presidential candidate and Trump rival, Nikki Haley, joined the long list of Republican cowards and hypocrites by endorsing Donald Trump after repeatedly publicly criticizing him as unfit for office. But before we unpack all that, if you end up liking this video and you want to support the channel, please be sure to hit the like, subscribe, and alert bell before you go. All right, friends, can't say I'm exactly surprised, but I am disheartened. I suppose part of me, despite how cynical I am, was holding out hope that finally there would be a major Republican who would put country above party. And given the fact that so many Nikki Haley supporters seem to despise Trump, given the fact that they're turning up 2 months after she dropped out of the race to vote for her against Trump, I thought this might be the opportunity where a Republican would take a principled stand and break away from the cult. And yet, that's not what happened. As most people expected, Nikki Haley bent the knee. We're going to play the full clip in which she makes this announcement and unpack it together.
You opened with some comments on the administration and the Democratic Party. You then talked a little bit about some of the shortcomings or worries you have about the Republican Party. And I couldn't help but think of two names when I heard you deliver that speech, Joe Biden and Donald Trump. So on these issues, these national security critical issues that you've described today, who do you think would do a better job in the White House, Joe Biden or Donald Trump?
As a voter, I put my priorities on a president who's going to have the backs of our allies and hold our enemies to account, who would secure the border, no more excuses. A president who would support capitalism and freedom. A president who understands we need less debt, not more debt. Trump has not been perfect on these policies. I've made that clear many, many times. But Biden has been a catastrophe. So I will be voting for Trump. Having said that, I stand by what I said in my suspension speech. Trump would be smart to reach out to the millions of people who voted for me and continue to support me and not assume that they're just going to be with him. And I genuinely hope he does that.
See no reason why they would, especially because you bent the knee yourself. And if they support you, odds are that they'll probably throw their lot in with him, given that they supported you and you supported him. It's kind of like the chain of hierarchy and the chain of loyalty. But what's funny about all of that, of course, is that on every metric she cited, Donald Trump isn't just imperfect, but he's genuinely terrible and in many ways worse than Biden, even from the conservative perspective. She talks about the debt. $8 trillion of debt was added in Donald Trump's 4 years in office. He promised he would not only not add to the debt, that he would eliminate all the national debt he inherited from Presidents Obama, Bush, Clinton, all the way back to Roosevelt, all the way back to President Washington. He was going to take away all of it. And instead, he added $8 trillion in 4 years, the single greatest contribution to the national debt in a 4-year term. He racked up tremendous deficits every year in office. In terms of the southern border, he ran into crises at the southern border. That's why he wanted to build his wall. He failed to build his wall. He tried to appropriate DOD funds to build his wall. It got struck down in court. He went on TV, tried to declare a state of emergency, begged Congress to pass legislation which would grant him the authority to deal with the crisis at the southern border at the time. He shut down the government over negotiations and impasse in Congress when dealing with border legislation. As a matter of fact, the only time that, the border saw a massive reduction in contacts was because of COVID. Is that the award-winning policy that you want to cite, Nikki Haley? In terms of having the backs of our allies, he's the one who threatened to withhold assistance to Ukraine against Russia unless Ukraine agreed to investigate a domestic political rival for Trump, Joe Biden. He's the one who says that He admires Vladimir Putin. He constantly praises Putin. Nikki Haley's called him out on all these things. As a matter of fact, we're going to play a clip here of Nikki Haley's own words that the Republican Accountability Project put together. But Trump has said that he wants to end the war in Ukraine instantly. The only way to do that is to try to force Ukraine into capitulating to Russia. How is that having the backs of our allies? President Biden, to his political detriment, has had Israel's back, right? I mean, billions of dollars of aid, constant rhetorical support. So it's not like Biden is lacking in that respect, though I do agree that Trump would be much more permissive of Israel's excesses. So by what metric? Nikki Haley made it clear that Donald Trump is mentally and spiritually, in terms of his character, unfit to be president. And now she's trying to whitewash his record by just saying, well, he's not perfect. That's the understatement of the century. As the Republican Accountability Project points out, Nikki Haley should listen to Nikki Haley.
I know Donald Trump very well. Chaos follows him. Donald Trump said that the election was stolen. He said that January 6th was a beautiful day. I think January 6th was a terrible day, and I think President Trump will have to answer for it.
He talks about revenge.
He's just going to become more unhinged. It's going to get worse. He's not qualified to be the president of the United States. Is this who we want as a president? Is this who we want our kids to see? I don't think so.
Apparently so. Very strange stuff, very unprincipled, hypocritical stuff from Nikki Haley here. Mehdi Hassan pointed out, what a pathetic person. Add her to the list with Ted Cruz and Marco Rubio and Chris Sununu and the rest, including Bill Barr. Trump made fun of her and her husband, went birther on her, and she's still voting for him. She called Trump unhinged, but she's still voting for him. Sheesh. Folks, it's a cult. It really is. It really is. There is no principle to be found within the Republican Party. Nikki Haley wasn't just criticizing some of the decisions that Trump made. She said he's manifestly unfit for office. And now she's voting for him. Strange stuff. Now, I'm actually going to play a clip from a different person here. Charlemagne the God, the host of The Breakfast Club, political commentator. He's very critical of President Biden. He endorsed President Biden in 2020, is refusing to explicitly endorse him in 2024. For some reason, though, he's also, when called out on it, saying he's signaling that he's still going to vote for Biden. He just doesn't want to come out and confirm it. Very strange stuff. But he also makes some really important observations about the Democratic Party at this time that I think is worth noting as we run into this situation.
I'm right there with you. So you've called this a race between crooks, cowards, and the couch.
That's
and
right.
You say Democrats are losing the messaging game.
But let's be clear about who I say are the crooks. I say Republicans are the crooks. I say Democrats are the cowards. And I say the couch is voter apathy. And I feel like, right now it looks like, voter apathy may win. But whose fault is that? Is that our fault or is it the candidates?
Well, and I'm curious at this juncture, 6 months out, who do you think wins?
Oh, I have no idea. I mean, it's a toss-up at this point. I really don't know. I think the person who goes out there and probably energizes their base the best at this point. And, when you look at somebody like President Biden, it feels like his base is pretty pissed off at him for a number of reasons.
Help him out. Well, no, look, I actually...
Help him out by doing what?
Well, I want to ask you something, because when you talk about crooks, we know that. We've talked about the Republicans ad nauseum here. But when you say the Democrats are cowards, how could Democrats show more courage right now in a way that speaks to you?
By doing what, Congresswoman Jasmine Crockett did to Marjorie Taylor Greene the other day, I think Michelle, the former, First Lady called a play one time, and she said, when they go low, we go high. I think you got to rip that play up.
Yep.
When they go low, you got to take it to the floor.
I don't even think she went low on that, because I think her pointing out the hypocrisy of them not attending to the rule was going high and using.
Yeah, so listen, I do think that observation by Charlemagne is really important. And again, I think he makes it clear. He talks about this in the interview, that even though he refuses to say, I'm voting for Joe Biden and you should vote for Joe Biden, he makes it clear constantly that he recognizes that Trump is worse and that he will be voting, and he will not be voting for the threat to democracy. And he says Trump's a threat to democracy. So in a roundabout way, he's saying he's voting for President Biden. So this is kind of a mixed bag. It's frustrating there, but he also makes some really good observations that I've talked about on this channel, that Democrats have got to step up their game and become much more consistently rhetorically aggressive. But how all this fits together is I was actually on a debate panel yesterday, at the time of recording yesterday, talking about this. There's a stock phrase that applied more to Democrats and Republicans at one point, but I think still applies generally now, which is that Democrats fall in love, Republicans fall in line. Now, in general, in the Trump era, Democrats have been relatively more coherent, and we see that certainly in Congress, right? Where the progressives and the moderates, for the most part, even though they grit their teeth, have been functioning as a relatively stable, coherent unit, whereas MAGA Republicans, particularly in the House, are struggling to get along, fighting like cats and dogs. But in terms of the endorsements and the support for Trump, we're seeing this with Chris Sununu, the Republican governor of New Hampshire, with Bill Barr, Donald Trump's former attorney general, with Marco Rubio, with Ted Cruz, as Mehdi Hassan points out, now Nikki Haley. Millions of people still turn up collectively as a whole and support Nikki Haley and have voted for Nikki Haley in Republican primaries. Hundreds of thousands since she dropped out of the race. In multiple states, Donald Trump has lost anywhere from 15 to 24% of the Republican primary vote to a woman who dropped out of the race 2 months ago, thus proving that the GOP has its issues. But Nikki Haley knows it's unlikely she has a future in Republican politics if she defies Trump and Trump remains the cult leader. So she made a very selfish, costly analysis. On the other hand, I don't know how people are going to vote for President Biden if they have principled objections to it. My hope is, as I argued on the debate panel yesterday, is that you would still recognize the good things that the Biden administration has done, that the Democratic Party have done, that you at least recognize that they would be better for the country and for you and your loved ones than the Republicans. Therefore, you shouldn't vote in such a way that would let the Republicans win, either voting for a Republican or voting third party or just staying home. The couch, as Charlemagne the God points out. I don't know how successful that'll be. I'm a cynic by nature, so I tend to assume the worst. But my hope is that Democrats will be able to put aside their differences and recognize that Biden is not a threat to democracy, whereas Trump is, that Biden may not have delivered all of the legislative and executive outcomes that you wanted, but certainly has delivered much more than you would get under Trump or a Republican, and that these things make a material, meaningful difference for millions of Americans. Food for thought. But anyway, for those of you who hoped that Nikki Haley would take a principled stance, we were sorely mistaken. Not that I believed I guess I kind of hoped that she would, but I'm a cynic by nature, so I always expect Republicans to bend the knee when push comes to shove. And here we are. Let me know what you think in the comments.